Imagine walking into a brand new school, where everyone's watching your every move. And within days, the biggest bullies decide you're their next target. Most students would back down. Most would stay quiet. But not Aliyah. What the bullies didn't know is that the quiet new girl they tried to break was trained to fight, and not just fight, but to win. What happened next left the entire school shocked and turned Aliyah into a legend. It was the very first day of school at Ridgewood High, and the courtyard buzzed with energy. Students laughed, swapped stories about their summer, and gathered in their familiar cliques, the athletes in their varsity jackets, the theater kids rehearsing lines for the upcoming play, the gamers glued to their phones, and the gossipers already whispering about who was dating who. Everything seemed ordinary, until the front gates creaked open. That's when every conversation slowed, every laugh softened, and dozens of curious eyes turned toward the entrance. Walking in, dressed in a bright red hoodie and black jeans, was the new girl. Her name was Aliyah Carter. Aliyah didn't walk nervously like most new students do. She didn't keep her head down or shuffle her feet. Instead, she moved with a quiet confidence, every step steady, every glance calm. It was as though she wasn't walking into a new school. She was walking into a place she already owned. The color of her hoodie made her stand out immediately, a bold red against the sea of blue and green around her. She carried a small backpack slung over one shoulder, and her braids framed a face that was unreadable, serious, but not unkind. Some students nudged their friends and whispered, "Who's she? She must be the transfer. She looks tough." Aliyah didn't seem to notice the attention, or maybe she just didn't care. She scanned the courtyard, not with fear, but with observation, like someone who had walked into unfamiliar territory and was already studying the layout. There was something about the way she carried herself. A presence, an unspoken strength. She wasn't the tallest. She wasn't the loudest. But there was a stillness in her that demanded respect, even if people couldn't explain why. But in high school, standing out is rarely safe. The same confidence that impressed some instantly painted a target on her back. The popular kids, the ones who ruled Ridgewood's social scene, noticed her too. And not with admiration, with suspicion. They saw her confidence as a challenge. They saw her red hoodie as defiance. And before Aliyah had even stepped fully into the courtyard, the wheels of conflict had already begun turning. Because Ridgewood High was about to learn a lesson they would never forget. This new girl was nothing like anyone they had met before. While many students admired Aliyah's quiet boldness, not every pair of eyes welcomed her with respect. In every school, there's always a group that believes they run the place. At Ridgewood High, that group was Jessica and her varsity jacket crew. Jessica wasn't just another student, she was the queen bee of Ridgewood. Tall, blonde, and sharp-tongued, she had built her reputation not through kindness or talent, but through intimidation. Her friends followed her like shadows, each one eager to laugh at her jokes, back up her insults, and keep her throne intact. Wherever Jessica went, people either got out of the way or ended up humiliated. The moment Jessica spotted Aliyah, her eyes narrowed. The new girl's red hoodie was like a flare in the crowd, demanding attention, and Jessica didn't like competition. Who does she think she is walking in like that? She muttered under her breath. Her crew leaned in closer. Madison, the loudest of the bunch, snickered. She doesn't even look nervous. Most new kids are shaking in their shoes. She's acting like she owns the place. Not for long, Jessica smirked, flipping her hair back. They huddled together, whispering like hunters eyeing their prey. To them, Aliyah's calm confidence wasn't strength, it was a challenge. And Jessica didn't tolerate challenges. She's going to learn real quick how things work around here, Jessica said coldly. Her friends nodded eagerly, already imagining ways to make the new girl's life miserable. Tripping her in the hallway, spreading rumors, stealing her seat at lunch, this was their idea of fun. For years, no one had stood up to them, and they were proud of the fear they spread. But Aliyah didn't even glance their way. She moved through the courtyard like she hadn't heard a word, like their whispers were too small to matter, and that made Jessica even angrier. "She's ignoring us," Madison hissed. Jessica's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Then we'll make sure she notices." What Jessica didn't realize, though, was that she had just chosen the wrong target. Aliyah wasn't like the other students she had pushed around. Beneath that quiet stare and steady walk was a fighter, someone who had faced real challenges, far beyond the petty cruelty of high school bullies. But for now, Jessica didn't know, and so the trap was set. The lunch bell rang and the cafeteria erupted with noise. Students rushed in groups, some carrying trays piled high with food, others huddling near the vending machines for a quick snack. The chatter and laughter filled the room until it shifted into whispers. By the vending machines, Jessica and her crew had formed a half circle, and in the middle stood Aaliyah. "Well, well, look who we have here," Jessica sneered, stepping closer. She tilted her head with that trademark smirk that had made countless students crumble. The new girl, quiet, mysterious, thinks she's too cool to talk to anyone? Her crew chuckled behind her like an echo, each laugh louder and meaner than the last. But Aaliyah didn't flinch. She stood with her arms folded across her chest, her red hoodie almost glowing under the cafeteria lights. Her eyes locked on Jessica's, calm and steady. "I don't think I'm too cool," she said evenly. "I just mind my own business." Her tone wasn't shaky. It wasn't apologetic. It was controlled, like she had said this exact line 1,000 times before. The bullies burst into laughter, mocking her words. "Did you hear that? She minds her own business." Madison, Jessica's right hand, clutched her stomach as if Aaliyah's calm response was the funniest joke she'd ever heard. Jessica leaned in closer, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, how cute. The new girl wants to be left alone. Newsflash, sweetheart. You don't get to mind your own business here. Not in Ridgewood High." The laughter grew louder. Some students nearby slowed their eating, watching the confrontation unfold. But too afraid to intervene, Aaliyah stayed still. No wide-eyed panic, no trembling hands. Just quiet control, and that only fueled Jessica's irritation. She was used to kids begging her to stop, pleading for mercy, or at least showing fear. But Aaliyah's calm stare made Jessica feel something she wasn't used to feeling, small. Jessica jabbed a finger toward Aaliyah's chest. "Don't think you're special, just because you walked in here wearing that flashy hoodie. Around here, I decide who fits in and who doesn't." For a moment, silence stretched between them. The crowd held its breath. Then Aaliyah slowly unfolded her arms, leaned just slightly forward, and said in a voice steady enough to cut through the noise, "Then maybe it's time someone changed the rules." The cafeteria went silent. Jessica blinked. For the first time, she wasn't laughing. The next day, the cafeteria buzzed with its usual chaos. Students shuffled in with trays of steaming food, filling every table with chatter and laughter. But in the corner, Jessica and her varsity jacket crew sat together, whispering and plotting their next move. Yesterday's encounter by the vending machines had left Jessica unsettled. Aaliyah's calmness had irritated her more than any insult could. "Today we put her in her place," Jessica declared, her eyes narrowing. When Aaliyah entered, balancing her tray of food, the crew immediately locked onto her. She walked steadily toward an empty table, her red hoodie standing out like a flame against the dull cafeteria walls. She didn't glance at anyone, didn't rush, didn't shrink back. She was focused, calm as ever. Jessica smirked. "Watch this." Just as Aaliyah set her tray down, one of Jessica's friends slid past her and, with a deliberate swipe of the elbow, sent the tray crashing to the floor. The sound of plates shattering and food splattering echoed through the cafeteria. Gasps filled the room. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. All eyes were on Aaliyah. Jessica leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, wearing a victorious grin. "Oops," she said mockingly. "Guess some people just can't hold on to their lunch." The bullies laughed, their voices rising above the silence. They waited for the reaction they always got, the tears, the panic, the scramble to clean up while everyone else laughed. That's how it always went. That's how it was supposed to go. But this time, it didn't. Aaliyah didn't cry. She didn't bend down to gather the food. She didn't even glance at the laughter circling her like sharks. Instead, she stood still, her eyes slowly lifting to meet Jessica's across the room. Her gaze was sharp, burning not with anger, but with something far stronger, quiet defiance. The cafeteria seemed to hold its breath. For the first time, Jessica's smirk faltered. The laughter of her crew echoed awkwardly around her, but even they noticed the shift in the air. Aaliyah wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't broken. She wasn't giving them the satisfaction they craved. Instead, she was sending a silent message, one Jessica couldn't ignore. You don't scare me. And in that moment, the power dynamic began to shift. By the end of the week, Ridgewood High was buzzing with whispers about the new girl. Everywhere Aaliyah went, eyes followed her. In the hallways, students leaned against lockers, murmuring behind cupped hands. In classrooms, notes passed from desk to desk carried her name. At lunch, entire tables gossiped as if she were some mystery to solve. "She's too scared to fight back," one student said, shaking their head. "Yeah, she just stood there when Jessica dumped her tray. Didn't even say a word," another added. "I give her a week. She won't last here," someone else muttered. To them, Aaliyah's silence looked like weakness. To them, her calm stare meant fear. But what no one realized was that Aaliyah wasn't scared at all. She was choosing not to fight. She wasn't intimidated. She was holding back. You see, Aaliyah had a past no one at Ridgewood knew about. For years, long before she transferred, she trained in mixed martial arts. Her older brother, Marcus, was a professional fighter, and from the time she was 10, he made sure she learned how to defend herself. Early mornings were spent sparring on worn-out mats in their garage. Evenings were dedicated to drills: jab, block, kick, repeat. Her weekends weren't filled with mall trips or sleepovers. They were spent sweating in gyms, practicing takedowns, and perfecting her technique. While other kids her age were glued to video games, Aaliyah was learning discipline, control, and power. By the time she reached high school, fighting wasn't something new to her, it was second nature. But Marcus had taught her an important rule. Real strength isn't about proving yourself to others. It's about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. And that was why Aaliyah kept her composure. She could have dropped Jessica and her crew in seconds. But why waste her skill on bullies? Why expose her strength before the right moment? So while the school whispered that she was weak, Aaliyah stayed quiet. While the rumors painted her as timid, she kept her calm. Because deep down, she knew the truth. The day would come when they pushed too far. And when that happened, Ridgewood High would finally see who she really was. And no rumor in the world could prepare them for that. Friday afternoon arrived, and the air at Ridgewood High felt charged with anticipation. Students streamed out into the courtyard, their voices carrying a nervous excitement. Word had spread fast. Jessica was planning to confront the new girl once and for all. By the time Aaliyah stepped outside, the courtyard was already buzzing. Dozens of students lingered around the steps and benches, their phones ready, cameras open, eager to catch whatever was about to happen. At Ridgewood, drama was entertainment, and today's show had a front-row audience. Jessica stood at the center with her crew flanking her like guards. She wore her green and white varsity jacket. The symbol of her status, and her smirk was wider than ever. "There she is!" she shouted, pointing at Aaliyah as the crowd parted. Aaliyah walked steadily into the circle forming around her. She didn't hurry. She didn't shrink back. She moved like she had expected this moment all along. "Come on, new girl," Jessica taunted, stepping forward and shoving Aaliyah's shoulder hard, enough to make her stumble slightly. "Let's see if you've got any guts." The crowd erupted with cheers and gasps. "Fight! Fight! Fight!" Voices chanted from every direction. Phones rose higher, red recording dots glowing. But Aaliyah didn't raise her fists. She simply straightened herself, brushed off the shoulder Jessica had shoved, and locked eyes with her, calm, controlled, silent. That silence only made Jessica angrier. "What's wrong? Afraid to mess up your little hoodie? Afraid everyone will see you for the coward you are?" She spat, circling her like a predator. The students leaned in, eyes wide, waiting for Aaliyah to break. But she didn't. Instead, she spoke in a voice steady enough to cut through the chants. "You don't want this fight." For a second, the words hung heavy in the air. The crowd went quiet, shocked at her confidence. Jessica scoffed, forcing out a laugh. "Oh, I do. And so does everyone here." She waved her hand at the crowd, and they cheered louder, feeding her ego. Still, Aaliyah didn't flinch. She simply adjusted the strap of her backpack, her eyes locked firmly on Jessica's. And though Jessica couldn't see it yet, the storm was about to break. Because Aaliyah wasn't warning her out of fear, she was warning her out of certainty. A hush fell over the courtyard as if time itself had paused. Aaliyah stood in the center of the circle, her red hoodie catching the late afternoon sun. Her arms hung loose at her sides, her shoulders relaxed, her breathing steady. She looked nothing like someone preparing for a fight. She looked like someone who already knew how it would end. "You don't want this fight," she said softly, her voice calm but cutting, carrying across the crowd. Jessica tilted her head back and laughed, her smirk spreading wider. To her, that calmness was weakness, nothing more than a mask for fear. She stepped closer, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, I do. And guess what? So does everyone here." The crowd erupted in cheers, a sea of voices chanting, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" Phones lifted higher, red recording lights flashing as students pressed closer to the circle. Some were thrilled, hungry for drama. Others watched nervously, their stomachs churning, sensing that this was no ordinary showdown. Jessica strutted in front of Aaliyah, circling like a lion sizing up its prey. Her friends clapped and shouted encouragements from behind her. "Get her, Jess!" Madison yelled. But Aaliyah didn't move. She simply tracked Jessica with her eyes, calm and unwavering. It was the stillness before a storm, a quiet so intense it almost scared the crowd more than shouting would have. Some students began whispering, "Why isn't she fighting back? She looks too calm. Maybe she knows something Jessica doesn't." Jessica stopped circling and stepped in close, her finger jabbing toward Aaliyah's face. "You think you're tough, don't you? You think walking in here with that little attitude makes you somebody?" Her voice dripped with venom. "Let me tell you something, you're nothing. And when I'm done with you, everyone's going to know it." The words hung in the air. The crowd leaned forward, every eye glued to Aaliyah. Still, Aaliyah didn't raise her hands, didn't shout back, didn't even blink. She simply tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. And in that moment, though Jessica couldn't see it, the energy in the courtyard had shifted. The bullies thought they were about to humiliate the new girl, but what was about to happen next would leave Ridgewood High in complete shock. The moment everyone had been waiting for finally came. Jessica's smirk twisted into a snarl as she stepped forward, raising her fist. She swung wildly, a sloppy punch fueled more by arrogance than skill. The crowd gasped as her fist cut through the air, everyone expecting the new girl to take the hit. But Aaliyah didn't. At the very last second, she shifted her weight, sliding smoothly to the side with the grace of someone who had practiced that motion 1,000 times before. Her movements were effortless, controlled, and shockingly fast. Jessica's punch missed completely, leaving her momentarily off balance. Before she could recover, Aaliyah lightly tapped Jessica's arm with her fingertips, just enough to redirect her momentum. Jessica stumbled forward 2 steps, catching herself before falling flat on her face. The crowd erupted in gasps and shouts. "Did you see that?" someone yelled. "She didn't even touch her!" another cried. "No way, she dodged her like nothing." Phones shook as students tried to capture every second, the courtyard alive with disbelief. Jessica spun around, her face red with humiliation. She had expected cheers, expected the crowd to rally behind her dominance. Instead, all eyes were on Aaliyah, the calm, collected girl who had just made Ridgewood's queen bee look foolish. "You think that was funny?" Jessica snapped, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and embarrassment. "Stand still and fight me!" But Aaliyah didn't rise to the taunt. She simply straightened her stance, hands still lowered, her expression unreadable. She didn't look scared. She didn't even look excited. She looked like someone in complete control. And that was what rattled Jessica the most. Madison shouted from the sidelines, "Come on, Jess, don't let her show you up." The other bullies echoed her words, desperate to save Jessica's pride. Jessica clenched her fists tighter, her jaw locking. The sting of embarrassment burned hotter than any punch could. She had never been made to look weak in front of the school, and now her entire reputation was hanging by a thread. The students whispered among themselves, their loyalties shifting. For the first time, Jessica wasn't the predator, she was the prey. And standing across from her, Aaliyah hadn't even broken a sweat. Jessica's humiliation boiled into rage. Her fists clenched, her teeth gritted, and she let out a frustrated growl. "You think you're tough?" she screamed, charging at Aaliyah with reckless fury. The crowd surged closer, anticipation thick in the air. Phones rose higher, capturing every second. But Aaliyah was ready. Jessica swung again, this time faster, angrier. But anger doesn't equal skill. Aaliyah's eyes tracked her movements with razor-sharp focus. At the very last moment, she raised her arm and blocked the strike with effortless precision, her body hardly moving. Gasps filled the courtyard. Before Jessica could even process the block, Aaliyah twisted her hips, spun to the side, and in one smooth motion, swept her leg low across Jessica's ankles. The move was lightning fast, so fast that Jessica didn't even realize what had happened until her feet left the ground. She hit the pavement with a heavy thud, the wind knocked from her lungs. She gasped, clutching her chest, her eyes wide with shock. The courtyard erupted, half the crowd cheering in disbelief, the other half stunned into silence. "Whoa, did you see that?" someone shouted. "She took her down like nothing," another exclaimed. "No way, Jessica's on the ground?" The bullies who stood at Jessica's side froze, their laughter gone, replaced by uncertainty. They glanced at each other, unsure if they should step forward. None of them had expected this. Jessica had always been untouchable, the queen of intimidation. And now she was sprawled on the ground, gasping for air. Aaliyah didn't gloat. She didn't cheer. She simply stood over Jessica, her stance calm, her expression steady. She looked down at the girl, who had spent days trying to humiliate her, and spoke in a voice strong enough for everyone to hear. "I told you. You didn't want this fight." Her words weren't shouted. They weren't cruel. They were simple, steady, and powerful. The courtyard fell silent again. Even the phones lowered slightly, as if the weight of her voice had frozen the moment in place. Jessica tried to push herself up, but her body trembled. For the first time in her reign, she wasn't feared. She was exposed. And Aaliyah hadn't even unleashed her full strength. Jessica lay on the ground, still trying to catch her breath. Her crew, who had been frozen in shock moments before, suddenly snapped out of it. Madison, her most loyal follower, shouted, "Don't just stand there! Get her!" Two of the bullies, both bigger than Aaliyah, charged forward without hesitation. The crowd erupted with excitement, phones shaking as students scrambled to capture what looked like a full-on brawl. But Aaliyah didn't panic. Her body shifted naturally into motion, her training guiding her every move. The first bully swung a clumsy right hook aimed at her face. With perfect timing, Aaliyah raised her forearm, blocking the strike with a sharp snap of her elbow. The force made the bully yelp in pain, clutching his wrist. Before he could recover, Aaliyah countered with a lightning-fast strike to his midsection, controlled, precise and powerful enough to knock the wind out of him. He staggered backward, collapsing to the ground, groaning in shock. The second bully tried to take advantage of the moment, rushing from the side with his arms out, hoping to tackle her. But Aaliyah's reflexes were too sharp. She pivoted on her heel, spun smoothly, and let his momentum carry him forward. With one swift movement, she sidestepped and gave a subtle push between his shoulder blades. The boy lost balance and stumbled straight to the pavement, landing hard beside his friend. The courtyard gasped in unison. Within seconds, both bullies were down, rolling, clutching their stomachs, groaning in pain. The crowd went wild. "Did you see that?" someone shouted. "She took down two of them, like it was nothing." "No way! She's unstoppable!" Students leapt onto benches, phones high in the air, narrating the fight like sports commentators. Some were cheering loudly while others stood frozen, their mouths hanging open. Aaliyah, however, didn't celebrate. She didn't raise her fists in victory. She simply stood tall, breathing steady, eyes scanning the circle. Her red hoodie swayed lightly in the breeze as she calmly reset her stance. It wasn't anger driving her, it was control. She was proving a point without saying a word. She couldn't be bullied, and she wouldn't be broken. The balance of power at Ridgewood High had just shifted, and everyone knew it. Jessica's body trembled as she pushed herself up from the ground, her palms scraping against the pavement. Her hair hung messy across her face, and her varsity jacket was smeared with dust. The once proud queen of Ridgewood High now looked fragile, shaken and desperate. The crowd watched in complete silence. Every phone was still recording, but even the students holding them weren't breathing too loudly, afraid to miss a single moment. Jessica's jaw clenched. Her pride was shattered, but her anger screamed for one last strike. She staggered forward, her fists shaking, determination flashing in her eyes. She had to do something, anything, to save face. But before she could swing again, Aaliyah stepped forward. She didn't move with violence. She didn't raise her fists. She simply closed the space between them with quiet authority, and locked eyes with Jessica. When she spoke, her voice was low, steady, and sharper than any punch could ever be. Being strong doesn't mean picking on people weaker than you, she said, every word clear enough for the entire courtyard to hear. It means protecting them. Remember that. Her tone wasn't mocking. It wasn't cruel. It was firm, like a teacher correcting a child or a leader laying down truth. The words landed harder than the takedown. Jessica froze. Her fists loosened. Her breathing quickened as her eyes darted around the crowd. For the first time in years, she wasn't the one in control. Her audience wasn't cheering for her anymore. They were staring at her with something she had never seen before: disappointment. Whispers spread quickly through the circle. She's right. Jessica's been bullying people forever. Finally, someone stood up to her. Jessica's face burned red. The realization struck her harder than the fall had. She hadn't just lost the fight, she had lost her reputation. The silence in the courtyard grew heavy, broken only by the sound of Jessica's shaky breathing. She took a step back, her confidence gone, her crew too stunned to come to her aid. And standing across from her, Aaliyah didn't gloat. She didn't smile in victory. She simply held her ground, her calm presence radiating more power than any threat ever could. For the first time, Ridgewood High understood who the real leader was. By Monday morning, Ridgewood High was buzzing with a new kind of energy. Hallways that once echoed with Jessica's laughter, and the taunts of her crew now carried a different sound, whispers about the girl in the red hoodie. Aaliyah took them all down like it was nothing. She didn't even break a sweat. I heard she's some kind of martial arts prodigy. The story spread faster than anyone could keep track of. By the time first period began, everyone, from freshmen to seniors, had heard about the fight in the courtyard. And the legend grew with each retelling. Some swore she fought off 5 bullies at once. Others claimed she could dodge punches with her eyes closed. Even the teachers couldn't escape the gossip. In the teacher's lounge, one of them whispered, "Did you hear about the new girl?" Apparently, she humbled Jessica and her whole crew in front of half the school. They shook their heads, half in disbelief, half in admiration. But while the school buzzed with her name, Aaliyah herself didn't change. She didn't strut through the halls looking for attention. She didn't replay the fight to anyone who asked. When people tried to crowd her with questions, she brushed them off with a simple smile and kept moving. She was the same calm, collected girl who had walked through the school gates on her very first day. That humility only made her reputation grow stronger. Students admired her not just for her skills, but for the way she carried herself. She had proven she was unstoppable, but also that she wasn't out to hurt anyone. Jessica and her crew? They faded into the background. For once, they walked the halls quietly, avoiding eye contact, their swagger gone. The roles had flipped. The bullies had become the outcasts, and no one was rushing to defend them. And Aaliyah? She became something more than just the new girl. She became a symbol at Ridgewood High, a reminder that true strength isn't loud or cruel. It's quiet, it's steady, and it stands up for what's right. From that day on, no one dared to mess with her, not out of fear but out of respect. As the crowd slowly broke apart and Aaliyah walked away from the courtyard, something remarkable lingered in the air. Dozens of students, many of whom had once kept their heads, down in silence when bullies ruled, now stood taller. They weren't cheering wildly anymore. They were reflecting. What they had just witnessed wasn't just a fight. It was a lesson. For years, Ridgewood High had run on fear. Students avoided eye contact with Jessica's crew, skipped hallways just to steer clear of trouble, and accepted cruelty as the price of survival. But that afternoon, everything shifted. Aaliyah, the quiet transfer student in the red hoodie, had shown them that real strength doesn't come from intimidation. It comes from courage, discipline, and self-respect. Her movements had been sharp, but her words had cut deeper than any strike. She didn't humiliate Jessica to boost her own ego. She didn't bask in the crowd's admiration. Instead, she showed restraint, grace, and control. And that's what shook people most. Aaliyah could have crushed them all, but she chose to teach instead of destroy. As she walked away, the whispers grew louder. She's different. She's not like anyone else here. She's the kind of strong we all wish we could be. Even the students who had once admired Jessica's cruelty now looked at her differently. Some felt shame for ever laughing at her victims. Others felt inspired, realizing that silence against bullies only gave them more power. And Jessica? She remained frozen for a long time after the fight. Her pride shattered, her reputation gone. When she finally stood, the courtyard no longer looked at her with fear. They looked at her with pity. That loss would follow her, but for Aaliyah, it wasn't about revenge, it was about shifting the balance. That day marked more than just Aaliyah's survival of her first week. It was the birth of a legend. From then on, whenever students spoke of courage at Ridgewood High, her name was the one they whispered with respect. Aaliyah Carter, the girl who taught them all that true power lives not in fists, but in the strength to rise above. She hadn't just survived. She had transformed the school, and legends, after all, never fade. And that's how one quiet new girl turned the tables on the bullies and became a legend at Ridgewood High. Real strength isn't about intimidation. It's about courage and respect. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next inspiring story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.